Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Goa, which is a board game designed by Rudiger Dorn back in 2004. This one accommodates 2 to 4 players and takes around 90 minutes to play. So Goa has really been a grail game for me. I've been after this one for a long time because it is long out of print, unfortunately. And I'm a big fan of Rudiger Dorn games, and I'm a big fan of games of this era. So this is one of those traditional Euros with an auction element to it. You've got a bit of engine building and you've even got a dash of push your luck. But before I get into Goa, I just want to give a shout out to kienda.co.uk who sponsored the show. So if you live in the UK and you regularly buy board games, be sure to check them out. Okay, so a game of Goa is going to look somewhat like this, where you have this main board here. We've got the money down the side in different denominations. You've got these colony tiles at the top here. So there's 4 different colonies, and if you manage to colonize all of them, you're going to get a lot more points than if you only colonize a few. You've got your colonists here. You've got these bonus action cards. You've got these ship cards, and you've also got these extra cards here, which are quite powerful and you can claim throughout the game. And we'll go into those in a little bit later. And the main feature on the board here is this big grid of these tiles, and these are all variable and they're going to get mixed up from game to game, so each time you're going to get a very different experience. And these are going to be what you're going to acquire throughout the game to give you benefits and bonuses, plantations, etc., to get your little economy going. So each player is going to have their individual setup as well, where you've got these 2 different sheets, the first of which is going to be your kind of action board here, where the more you invest in these things, you're going to get more powerful actions. So you've kind of got 6 basic actions. You've got 5 on the board here, but one of those actions is to upgrade, and we'll talk about how that works mechanically shortly. And of course, the objective of this game is to get as many victory points as you can, and you're going to do that by upgrading these different features, these different segments of your board as much as you can, because as you can see here from this numbers down the side, the more you do that, you can potentially get 10 points for each one that you do. Additionally, you've got this little board here as well, which maps your the colonies that you've actually managed to claim, and also the plantations that you can get throughout the game. You can only have 4 active at any time. Each player is also going to have a number of markers here equal to the number of people in the game plus 1. Additionally, there are some kind of communal supplies here. So you've got all the different spices and stuff that you can play with, and I've just set up these here just because I'm only using 1 player's piece, but I'll be using those for example shortly. But let's get into how the game actually plays. Okay, so each game of Goa is going to be divided into 2 halves. So you've got the A half and the B half. The B half, the new slightly stronger tiles come into play. And each of those halves is going to be divided into 4 rounds, and each of those rounds is going to be divided into 3 phases. So ultimately you've got 8 rounds, but each of those rounds is going to consist of 3 different things you need to do. So the first thing you're going to do is the first player is going to choose where to put this first player token, and that's going to show where the track is going to start in terms of which tiles are going to be auctioned for. So let's just say the yellow player is the first player, and they choose to put the first player marker here, and then they'd put their number 1 token on top of it to show this is going to be the first token that's going to be auctioned for. And because that is always going to be the case, the first player marker is always going to go on the edge of the board or in future rounds in any empty spot. And that means whoever wins it next turn is going to be the first player in the following turn, but also going to take a bonus action card, which can be very strong to have. And then it's going to go to the next player. So let's just say the blue player's next. They are going to choose any adjacent tile to it, either orthogonal or diagonal, to show which tile is going to be auctioned next. So let's just say the blue player goes here because he thinks that's going to be a good tile to have. And then the next player, let's say, goes here. So the green player wants this nutmeg plantation. And then the red player will place their 4 token. And they can go here or here because they can't share a spot with anybody else. So they've got the settlement tile or this extra actions tile. So let's just say they want this one here because those actions are really worth having. And then the yellow player, because they've been first, they also get to place an additional token. So they'll place their number 5 here, for example. Now, of course, if there were fewer players in the game, there'll be less of these tokens out there. So in a 4-player game, there'll be 5 tokens. A 3-player game, there'll be 4 tokens. In a 2-player game, there'll be 3 tokens, of course, because the first player gets to place 2. So once all the initial tokens are placed onto the board, you're going to go into the auction phase, where you're going to start with number 1 here. So then it's going to, in a kind of a once-off auction in a round-robin fashion, so starting with the player's token here, the player to the left of them is going to start with an opening bid, or they could choose to pass, of course. So let's just say the blue player chooses to bid 2, and then the green player bids 3, the red player might pass, and then it's going to go back to the yellow player, so that's going to be everybody's bids in. So we've got a big bid, a final bid of 3, and that means that the yellow player can either accept that 3 bid and basically forfeit the first player marker to the person who bid the most, or they can choose to pay 1 less money than the highest bid. So you're always in a bit of a power position when you are the player who's got that particular tile under control. So again, this yellow player can either accept the 3 bid from the red player, or they can play 1 fewer, as in paying 2 money to the bank in order to keep hold of this first player marker and get a bonus action card. So let's just say the yellow player wants to keep hold of this first player marker, therefore they could play 2 money to the bank, like so, discarding it, and they'll keep hold of that one and take a bonus action card for their supply, which again can come in very strong use a bit later. And then you're going to go onto the next tile here, so you've got the blue 2 here. Again, it's going to start off in a once-off round-robin fashion, and whoever wins the bid is going to either pay the player who's got the token on it, or of course if the person who's actually controlling that tile wants to claim that tile for themselves, they can pay 1 money less than the highest bid. So it's a really strange auction where you have to be very careful about where you want to tinker your auction or your bid to, because you're always going to bear in mind that the person controlling the tile can always play 1 less, and which can be quite significant. So once all those tiles have been claimed, of course, the board is going to get emptier and emptier, but we'll talk about the significance of all the tiles in a little bit, because it's not going to make much sense without knowing the next part of the game, which is where you go into your personal actions and use things on your action board here. So in each turn, or after you've done the auction phase, you're going to have the opportunity in a round-robin fashion to take 3 separate actions, or potentially more, by discarding these action cards. And you're going to have 6 different options on what you can do. So the first of which is to take a boat card, and you're going to take a number of cards equal to the spot here. So if I had upgraded to this spot here, I could take 3 boat cards with a single action, but at the moment I'm only taking 1. So that's a very simple action, and that applies to these 3 here. Actually, they're all very simple. This one here lets you take one of the spices, or potentially more spices, depending on your number there, but you need to have plantations in order to accommodate them. The next one is to take one of these action cards, and you can draw this many, and you can keep this many in your hand. So the further you upgrade, the more you can draw and the more you can keep in your hand. And again, we'll go through those later because these are quite strong and definitely a big part of the game. And the other action here is to colonize one of these different colonies here on the board. So you've got Kilon, Cochin, Madras and Calicut. They all have different values on them. So you can see here on your separate player board, you've got Kilon, which is the easiest one to colonise because it only takes 6 colonists to do so, but Calicut is quite difficult because it costs 12. And that is where this part of the game is going to come in. And this is going to be basically a permanent number of colonists that you have available at any time. So you don't actually spend these or gain these when you take this action. They're just a passive ability that you have. And when you take that colonize action, you have to claim which one you want to colonize first. So let's just say I wanted to colonize Kilon. I could, first off, as a base value, I'd start with any of these. So let's just say I start with a base value of 2. I would have a starting value of 2, and then I'll flip over 2 of these cards, because these are kind of multi-use cards here, and add this value here. So at the moment we're up to 4, and then we are up to 5. So it's not going to be quite enough to colonize, because if you remember, we needed 6 to colonize it. But that is where these cards come into play, where you can boost that value to hopefully get you past that threshold and claim that colony. And when you do that, you can pick up one of these tiles, add it to your little colony board here, like so, and take any resources on them. So that either take one of these resources or one of these resources, put it on that one spot. And as I said earlier, the more of these you get at the end of the game works on a sliding scale bonus. So if you get all of them, I think you get 10 points. If you only get 1, you get 1 point, and so on. So you really want to be making sure that you get as many of those colonies done as possible. And the final action you can take is to actually upgrade the different elements here in the first place. So as you can see here, I might need one of these resources in order to slide this one to this spot here, and therefore it makes me more efficient in future rounds. And as you can see here, once you get everything on a certain row, then you can get these bonus action cards, which comes into play because normally, as I said, you only get 3 actions per phase. but you can actually end up taking more of them depending on if you have these bonus action cards, which again can be very useful, but you can only ever store one back from round to round. So you need to make sure you use them or potentially lose them. And of course, if you get to the highest areas here, then you can actually get these bonus action cards as well, which can come into big use. And the more you upgrade things, the more expensive it's going to be. But of course, that's going to be the big part of your end game scoring. Now, once everybody's taken their actions from the previous round, you're going to start again with the player who won the first player marker in the last round, and they're going to start from a new spot, so either in an empty space or on one of these border spaces, and you're going to go again and repeat that process. So let's talk about what some of the tiles actually do and what you're actually trying to bid for. So you've got tiles like this, where you can take a whole bunch of resources instantly, like these ships here. And something I should have said is when you upgrade your player board, not only do you have to spend the resources, you have to spend a ship for each resources you spend as well. So ships are very useful to have. And you've got the plantations, which of course are good for storing those resources so you don't have to waste them. And you've got these ones here, like you get a colonist each round. So these really do build up if you acquire that tile early. And more colonies here, you've got this kind of wild plantation here, which are really useful. You've got this one's here where you can either take ships or colonists. This one here makes all your level 1 plantations, like this one here, worth 3 points at the end of the game rather than just the usual 1. You've got a whole bunch of colonists there. You've got this one here where you can discard 6 of any goods to get 5 victory points at the end. You've got these expedition cards here. You've got the ones that we claimed earlier, like again, more colonists or more boats, more plantations, double actions, which are great. One of each, so you've got like a boat, an action and a colonists, and so on. So the first round is pretty simple, but we'll talk about what the second round does right now. So I've set up some phase B tiles here just to show you how the game escalates. So you've got these tiles that come into play which give you straight up victory points, which are not insignificant because every point you get in this game is massive. It's not a terribly high scoring game, so this is a really good tile to have. You've got bigger plantations here, so you've got these 3-size ones which give you a great capacity to store things back. You've got this espionage one here, which is great because if you're really lagging behind on one of these different tracks but your opponent isn't, let's say for example I had the only 1 upgrade on the ship here but my opponent say had 5, then I can actually leech off their efforts and take that 5 at one time. So that's a really good thing to kind of fast track on one of the things you're lagging behind on. You've got these more versatile ones here. You've got ones here that give you an expedition card each round, which is really strong. This Vice King one here is great because it gives you a free upgrade on your furthest behind track. And this resupply one that brings in this element here to either take any of the resources of your choice equal to what you flipped over. You've got more points here. You've got a swap tile, which means when you take this one, you can swap it for one left on the board to give you that extra flexibility. And you've got one here that actually lets you swap a tile or swap this tile for one that's been actually not brought into play in the first place, because not every tile is going to show up game after game. So before we move on, I just wanted to show a few of these expedition cards to show what they're capable of. So you can see this one here, you can end up just selling spices from your plantations and colonies in order to get straight up money, and of course money being a big factor in this game. This one here lets you pay money to get the upgrades on your player board rather than playing the spice value. So this is a really good way to fast track that if you've got that extra coin in your pocket. This one here, that means when you upgrade, you don't have to pay either spices or ships, depending on which version you have that. So you get a bit of a discount there. This one here means when you colonize, instead of just flipping 2 cards, you get to flip 3. This one here, of course, just gives you your basic intake of resources. So these are all really useful to have. And additionally, if you don't want to play the cards for the action themselves, you can actually store them back in your hand, bearing in mind the symbol that you have here. And the more symbols you have of the same type, gives you more points based on a sliding scale. So another way to get extra points into your pocket. So that pretty much shows all the mechanisms and how the game plays. Let's talk about some thoughts here. So first off, mechanisms. Rudiger Dorn is great at what he does, and I love the kind of mix of the action grid here with that auction system. So you actually have that kind of point-to-point movement mechanism mixed with what's going to be coming up for auction. I've never seen that done before, and it's a really good blend of mechanisms that I like quite a lot, and it can actually play a big part in how the following round is going to play out, because you might want to start here as a first player, knowing for a fact that one of these other auction tiles have to come up next because you can only ever go adjacent to where you existingly are. But the person who places that token is going to be in the kind of power position because they're going to be the one who can acquire that tile for cheaper. So not only do you have to focus on which tile you want to claim for yourself because you're going to get a better deal for taking it, but also that you're laying the foundation for somebody else to be there. So I really do like the way that works, and I love the flow of money as well, because you can't just win every auction because you're going to be paying or lining the pockets of other players, but at the same time you're going to run out of money yourself. So it does have a really nice cash flow in this game, where sometimes you might even just place one of your markers on a particular tile that you know somebody else wants, so that will give you a nice big cash injection to keep you going throughout the game and pay for your future bids. So I love this grid system. It's fantastic. It works so well, and it can really it really does kind of throw the auction mechanism on its head and again add a new direction to that genre. Additionally, I do like the fact that this isn't just a straight up throw your bid in style auction. It's a one-off auction. Everybody gets to throw their one bid in, and then that final player will get to either undercut it by one or choose to pass. And that works really well for this style of game. I think if it was a straight up, bid what you want style auction again and again until someone runs out of money, then I think that could bog the game down quite a bit, and it wouldn't quite feel right for this one. This one, you'd really do have to leverage that bid just right so that you can afford it, but also you're not giving the person whose tile that is, or person who's controlling that tile, that really good, strong advantage to get that for a really good deal. Additionally, these player boards work so well. So this is pretty much your hub on everything you want to do in the game. And I love it when games kind of force you to do everything, but you haven't got enough time to do everything. And that is one of the main things I took away from Goa, is how time can really run away from you. And you only get eight rounds in the game to get everything done and get as many points as you can, and you can't upgrade everything. And that's why these different action cards can come really play a big part in getting more done and get more bang for your buck, which makes, again, taking that first player marker even more kind of inviting to do so. But yeah, I love the fact you have to balance everything so carefully. You want to have your ships because you need your ships and spices in order to upgrade anything in the first place, which is going to be a massive way you're going to get points. You need the spices because you need to upgrade everything, but you need the storage from the plantations in order to get those spices in the first place. Of course you need money because you need to keep buying future tiles to keep yourself getting stronger and stronger, but maybe you can get by on other tiles that you've collected beforehand because you might get an income in other ways. And of course you want to colonize because colonizing gives you way more storage for different spices and will give you a big point swing if you manage to get them all. So yeah, a lot of good things going on here, and I love the way you have to spin all those plates. Even the colony action, which plays a big part in a game like this. Normally, when you've got a game this calculated and this kind of involved and deep, I don't really like push your luck mechanisms in them, but this one actually works so well because you can actually invest in getting a base layer or base level of these colonists, so you've got a really nice strong platform to start with in the first place. You can collect the cards to try and ensure that you get that victory, but that push your luck element just adds a little bit more fun into the game and doesn't actually work against it. And if you fail, you still get compensated by taking a colony card, which could help you in future rounds. So yeah, it just works well for me, and I didn't think it would, but it actually does. So yeah, very happy with how this game works mechanically. I wouldn't really expect anything less from a designer like Rudiger Dorn. The time investment for Goa is pretty much on the money for me. This is a 90-minute game, which is pretty much my sweet spot for a game like this. I certainly don't feel this game outstays its welcome for a second, and it does tick along extremely nicely. You don't really find yourself losing interest when it's another player's turn, because to be honest, most of the game you are always invested in what's going on, what's going to come up next, how much you're going to spend, are you going to get money for doing so, can you afford to do things, what resources do you need to hold back. And how are you going to spend your 3 action points? Are you going to invest in getting more actions so you can do that? So you're pretty much always in the game on this one. You're not going to lose interest when it's another player's turn because you're going to be so invested in what you're doing. And that maybe that extra little bit of time that you get to mull over your decision is actually going to be a useful thing. The player interaction is pretty damn fantastic, as you'd expect with Euros from this era. Whenever you have an auction, there's always going to be some kind of passive player interaction. But this one, because the money flows from player to player, it makes it that more interesting. Because, somebody might be sat on a tile that you really want, but you've got to be cautious that, if you spend too much money on it, then you're going to give them such a strong position for the following tiles. But at the same time, if you bid too low, then they're probably going to get an absolute steal because they actually get pay one lower than that as well. So yeah, all the interaction here is just embedded in the game. It doesn't feel like it's multiplayer solitaire because, again, this grid is going to play a big part. Being first player is so significant because you're really going to have a strong say in which tiles are going to come up that round. So yeah, everything is contested over, and that level of tension and that scarcity of the resources that you want, or that tile that you want, does shine through so strongly, and I love that. So let's talk about aesthetics and production. So first off, this is really kind of synonymous with the era. You know, this game is going back 18 years now, at least at the time of this recording. And these kind of games really do kind of just warm my heart. I love the way this game looks. It's got that real throwback Euro feel. All the cards, very simple in what they do. There's not a surplus of materials here, just very muted, very toned back, and just fits the kind of game this one is. Not much confusion in terms of what the different tiles do, and even the rulebook itself really does lay things out crystal clear so you can quickly clean things up if you do have a little bit of confusion about what the tiles do. The resources themselves are the wooden spices, and they should have stickers on them, but I've been a bit lazy and not stuck them on yet. But yeah, these are all good. The player boards themselves, they are pretty much paper thin, which is a bit disappointing, but I suppose at the time production wasn't such a big thing as it is now. I think the sense of progression in this game is fantastic. Again, I mentioned before that the time really does feel like it gets away from you in this game. 8 turns to get everything done, and you can't do it, but that is really where the tension shines through. It makes the game come alive, and it ramps up in a crescendo towards the end as these bonus actions become more and more valuable. And you know, you find yourself at the end, people are fighting over, at the beginning of the game, people are fighting over money, but at the end of the game, people are fighting over actions because they just need that extra action to get that resource that they might want in order to upgrade their player board to get into that next bracket of points. So yeah, I really do love the pacing of this game. It does feel just right, just so delicately balanced in terms of how many rounds this one takes, what you can do on your turns, etc. So yeah, I think this game is just so well play tested and so well rounded in terms of the game length, the actions you can take, and the actual points output you can get at the end. Just brilliantly done. The scalability of Goa is actually quite a funny one because normally auction games do not work well at 2 players. There are the odd exception of that, but this one I would happily play at 2 players. It will become a lot more kind of cerebral in the opportunities that you leave for the other person in terms of the tiles that come up, and it will become a little bit more tighter, and you'll be a lot more conscious on what you want your opponent to have or not have. So yeah, in terms of the scalability, I think this game is pretty fantastic. So final thoughts on Goa. So as I said, this was really a Grail game for me. Expectations sky high, and I'm so happy to say this game delivered and more. I think this game is brilliantly executed. I pretty much love everything about it. You know, this is really my jam of game. I love auctions, I love push your luck, I love this kind of light engine building. This all just comes together so harmoniously, and this feels like a real classic to me, and this is certainly going to stay in my collection for a long, long time to come. I'm really proud owner of this game. I think if you can come across this one, and you do like this era of tight, succinct games, then you are going to love it because, you know, this is a great designer with an amazing pedigree, and this is probably one of his best designs that I've played. And it's criminal that this one's not in print anymore because this one should be still in print, still in circulation for all the players who like this kind of game to enjoy, because it is an absolute gem of a game that I love. I love how you have to do everything in this game. There's not enough time to do everything. You know, you need the spices, you need the money, you need the boats, you need these expedition cards, you want to colonize, and you can't do it all, but just prioritizing things is where the money is at. So love the back and forth, love the auction mechanism, love that kind of point-to-point movement, just no complaints whatsoever. And this is going to be a proud earner of a shield, or an elite shield, so my highest commendation for Goa, and I've got no hesitancy to give it that. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you found it useful or at least somewhat entertaining, then please hit like and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Additionally, if you wish to support the show, because I am a one-man operation and I don't get any support from publishers, then please consider backing on Patreon at patreon.com/chairman of the board, where you can back for as little as £2 per month. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.